So while this specific question is pretty particular to my field, I think that this type of question is something that many of us have faced, particularly those of us who are not in scientific or technical agencies. I had a pretty fun experience answering this question during my fellowship this year, and I wanted to share my experience, but also my approach with you. And my story starts with the State Department building itself. It turns out that the building is chock full of fossils in our marble walls and limestone floors. And these are just a few examples. So we have a coral, some calcareous algae, and ancient cousins to modern starfish and octopi. I can't keep this to myself, so as a few people in this room will attest, I like to point them out while I'm walking around the building. And on one such occasion, one of my colleagues mentioned that they had never noticed these fossils, despite having worked in the building for years, and that I should probably look into signing up for an activity for Take Your Child to Work Day. So I did. I created a little brochure and activity book containing some pretty basic background on the types of organisms we might be seeing, as well as the rocks themselves. And I got a loan of teaching collection material from the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, so I could actually show what the full organism looked like, rather than just like the little slices that we might be seeing in the walls. Of course, I wanted my tour to be peer-reviewed, so who else better to peer-review it than my fellow fellows? And so we were glancing at some particularly interesting fossils, and a woman walked by and gave us a pretty weird look and asked us, why were we looking at the walls? I explained that I was a paleontologist and that these were kind of fossils from a shallow tropical marine floor from about 375 million years ago, and this was basically her response. She was pretty excited about it, and so she actually asked me to arrange a tour for her office the next week, which is why I ended up leading a group of 12 experienced Foreign Service officers around the building. And while we were going from the first stop on the tour to the next, one of the women on the tour kind of asked me how a paleontologist had ended up at State, and how, if at all, my research and experience in geology and paleontology related to my work on the China desk. I mentioned the AAAS program and how scientists are actually very well prepared to work in policy. My personal background was very interdisciplinary, and just like my work on the China desk, I draw data and evidence and perspectives from many different fields and combine them into a coherent policy. And more importantly, I think geologists, I'm biased, have a few advantages. We're used to thinking about complex systems that span both space and time, and we're just naturally oriented to think about the world as a whole. I no longer work on millions of years, but being able to think about decades into the future when managing the US-China relationship is pretty important. And she was pretty excited about this answer, and she had never met a scientist at State before. She asked me what my plans were for after. I told her that I was planning on joining the Foreign Service, and she was glad to hear that someone with my kind of critical thinking and analytical background was joining the State Department, and she promised never to take scientists for granted ever again.